everyone, it's Miss Hinde-Taylor here reading chapter 13 of Half a King by Yarvi, and this chapter is called The Fool Strikes. Jowd pulled their oar, and so did Yarvi, with the calluses thickening even on his crippled hand, his face hardening against the weather, and his body turning lean and tough as Trigg's whip. They rounded Bell's Point in a soaking squall, that's like a small storm, hardly able to see the brooding fortress there for the rain, and turned eastwards into calmer waters, busy with ships of all shapes and nations, Yarvi twisting around at the oar in his eagerness to see Skanken House. It was the elf ruins he saw first, of course. The giant walls, sheer and perfectly smooth at their bases, were unmarked by Mother Sea's fury, but torn off ragged higher up, twisting metal showing in the cracks like splintered bone in a wound, battlements of new masonry perching at their tops, the flags of the High King proudly fluttering. The Tower of the Ministry loomed over all, over every building about the shattered sea, unless you counted the ruins of Stockholm or Lalangrad, where no man dared tread. For 3/4 of its staggering height, it was elf-built, pillars of jointless stone, perfectly square, perfectly true, with giant expanses of black elf glass still twinkling at some of the great windows. At perhaps 5 times the height of the tallest tower in Thorby Citadel, the elf stone was sheared away, rock melted and congealed in giant tears by the breaking of God. Above, long generations of ministers had constructed a riotous crown of timber and tile, turrets, platforms, slumping roofs, balconies sprouting with smoking chimneys and festooned with dangling ropes and chains, all streaked with age and droppings, the rotting work of men ridiculous by comparison with the stark perfection below. Grey specks circled the highest domes, doves perhaps, like the ones Yarvi's once tended, like the one that lured his father to his death, croaking out messages from the many ministers scattered about the shattered sea. Could he even see the odd bronze-feathered eagle carrying the High King's wishes back? In that ancient tower Yarvi would have taken the test. There he would have kissed the cheek of Grandmother Wexham when he passed. There his life as a prince would have ended, and his life as a minister begun, and his life as a wretched slave never come to pass. "Unship the oars!" called Smail. "Unship the oars!" bellowed Trigg, to make sure everyone he saw gave the orders. "Oars out, oars in," grunted Rolf. "You'd think they could make up their bloody minds. Skanken House." Yarvi rubbed at the red raw patches on his wrist as the south wind was heaved into its berth, while Smail leant from the aft castle and screamed at the struggling dockers to take care. The centre of the world. Jowd snorted. "Compared to the great cities of Catalia, this is a stable." "Well, we're not in Catalia." "No." The big man heaved a heavy sigh, sadly. The dock stank of old rot and salt decay, and with impressive power to be noticed over the stink of Yarvi and his companions. Many of the berths were vacant. The windows of the decaying buildings behind gaped dark and empty. On the dockside, a great heap of mouldering grain sprouted with weeds. Guardsmen in the patched livery of the High King sat idle and threw dice. Beggars slouched in the shadows. Perhaps it was the bigger city, but there was none of the vigour and vitality of Thorby, none of the bustle or new building. The elf ruins might have been stupendous, but the parts of Skanken House that men had built seemed quite a disappointment. Yarvi curled his tongue and neatly spat over the side of the ship. "Nice." Rolf gave him a nod. "Your rowing's not up to much, but you're coming on where it really matters." "You must struggle by without me, little ones." Shadixarim strutted from her cabin in her most garish garments, working an extra ring or two onto her fingers. "I am expected at the Tower of the Ministry." "Our money's expected," grumbled Trigg. "How much for a licence this year?" "My guess would be a little more than last year." Shadixarim licked her knuckles so she could twist a particularly gaudy bauble over it. "There is, in general, an upward trajectory to the High King's fees. Better to toss our money to Mother Sea than to the Ministry's jackals." "I'd toss you to Mother Sea if I didn't think she'd toss you straight back." Shadixarim held out her jewel-crusted hand at arm's length to admire. "With a licence we can trade anywhere around the shattered sea. Without one, pah!" Then she blew all profits away through her fingertips. "The High King is jealous of his revenues," muttered Jowd. "Course he is," said Rolf as they watched their captain aim a lazy kick at nothing, then stroll across the banks and gangplank, Ankran scrambling after her on a short length of chain. "It's his revenues that make him high. Without him, he'll crash to earth like the rest of us." "And great men need great enemies," said Jowd, "and war's a damned expensive hobby." Building temples comes close behind. Rolf nodded up at the skeleton of a huge building showing itself above the nearest roofs, so covered in a ramshackle web of scaffolds, hoists and platforms Yarvi could hardly make out its shape. That's the High King's temple to this new god of his. Rolf spat out of the rollock, missed and splattered the timbers instead. A monument to his own vanity. 4 years in the building and still not halfway done. Sometimes I think there can be no such thing as gods at all, mused Gerald, stroking thoughtfully at his pursed lips with a fingertip. Then I wonder who can be making my life such hell. An old god, said Yarvi, not a new. How do you mean? Asked Rolf. Before the elves made their war upon her, there was one god. But in their arrogance they used a magic so strong it ripped open the last door, destroyed them all, and broke the one god into the many. Yarvi nodded towards their giant building site. Some in the south believe the one god cannot ever be truly broken, that the many are merely aspects of the one. It seems the High King has seen the merits of their theology, or at least Grandmother Wexen has. He considered that. Or perhaps she sees a profit in currying favour with the Empress of the South by praying the same way she does. He remembered the hungry brightness in her eye as he knelt before her. Or she thinks that folk who kneel to one god will kneel more easily to one High King. Rolf spat again. The last High King was bad enough, but he ranked himself as a first among brothers. The older this one gets, the more he's taken with his own power. He and his damned minister won't be happy till they're set above their own one god, and all the world kneels before their withered arses. A man who worships the one god cannot choose his own path. He is given it from on high, mused Yarvi. He cannot refuse requests, but must bow to commands. He drew up a length of his chain and frowned down at it. The one god makes a chain through the world, from the High King through the little kings to the rest of us, each link with its right place. All are made slaves. Gerald was frowning sideways. You are a deep thinker, Yorv. Yarvi shrugged and let his chain drop, less use than a good hand to an oarsman. How can one god make all the world work anyway? Rolf held his arms out to encompass the rotting city and all of its people. How can one god be for the cattle and the fish and the sea and the sky, and for war and peace both? A lot of damn nonsense. Perhaps the one god is like me. Samael sprawled on the aft-castle, propped up on one elbow, with her head resting on her bony shoulder and one leg dangling. Lazy, grunted Gerald. She gave a grin. She chooses the course, but has lots of little gods chained up to do the rowing. Oh, pardon me, almighty one, said Yarvi, but from where I sit, you look to have a chain of your own. For now, she said, tossing a loop of it over her shoulder like a scarf. One god, snorted Rolf again, still shaking his head towards the quarter-built temple. Better that one than none at all, grunted Trig as he stalked past. The oar slaves fell silent at that, all knowing the course would take them past the land of the Shens next, who had no mercy on outsiders and prayed to no god and knelt to no king, however high he said he was. Great dangers make great profits, though, Shadixarim informed the crew when she sprang back aboard, holding high a rune-scrawled licence, eyes so bright with triumphs one might have thought she had it from the hand of the High King himself. That paper won't protect us from the Shens, someone grunted from the bench behind. They skin their captives and eat their own dead. Yarvi snorted. He had studied the language and customs of most of the peoples around the Shattered Sea. The food of fear is ignorance, Mother Gundring used to say. The death of fear is knowledge. When you study a race of men, you find they are just men like any others. The Shens don't like outsiders, since we're always stealing them from slaves. They're no more savage than any other people. As bad as that, muttered Jowd, eyeing Trig as he uncoiled his whip. They rowed east that afternoon with a new licence and a new cargo, but the same old chains, the tower of the ministry dwindling into the haze of distance beyond their wake. At sunset they put into a sheltered cove, Mother Sun scattering gold on the water as she sank behind the world, painting strange colours among the clouds. I don't like the look of that sky. Samael had swarmed up one of the masts, legs hooked over the yard, frowning off towards the horizon. We should stay here tomorrow. Shadixaram waved her warnings away like flies. The storms in this little pond are nothing, and I've always had outstanding weather luck. We go on. And she flung an empty bottle into the sea and called to Ankran for another, leaving Samael to shake her head at the heavens unmarked. While the south wind rocked gently and the guards and sailors huddled at a brazier on the forecastle to dice her trinkets, one of the slaves began to sing a bawdy song in a voice thin and cracked. At one point he forgot the words and filled them in with nonsense sounds, but at the end there was a scattering of tired laughter, and the hollow thumping of fists on oars in approval. Another man broke in with a rousing bass, the song of Baal the Builder, who in truth had built nothing but heaps of corpses and made himself the first high king with fire and sword and a hard word for everyone. Tyrants look far better when looked back on, though, and soon enough other voices joined the first. Eventually Baal passed through the last door in battle, as heroes do, and the song came to an end, as songs do, and the singer was rewarded with a round of wood-thumping of his own. "Who else has a tune?" somebody called. And to everyone's surprise, not least his own, it turned out Yarvi did. It was one his mother used to sing at night when he was young and scared in the dark. He did not know why, but it came to him then. But his voice soared high and free, to places far from the reeking ship and things these men had long forgotten. Jowd blinked at him, and Rolf stared, and it seemed to Yarvi that, chained and helpless in his rotting tub, he had never sung half so well. There was a silence when he was done, with only the faint creaking of the ship on the shifting water, and the wind in the rigging, and the far, high calls of distant gulls. "Give us another," someone said. So Yarvi gave them another, and another after that. He gave them songs of love lost and love found, of high deeds and low. The lay of Froki, so cold-blooded he slept through a battle, and the song of Ashenlear, so sharp-eyed she could count every grain of sand on a beach. He sang of Harald the far-travelled, who beat the black-skinned king of Debra in a race, and in the end sailed so far he fell off the edge of the world. He sang of Ungolf Clovenfoot, hammer of the Vansterman, and did not mention the man was his great-grandfather. Each time he finished, he was asked for another until Father Moon's crescent showed over the hills, and the stars began to peep through heaven's cloth, and the last note of the tale of Berg, who died to found the ministry and protect the world from magic, smoked out into the dust. Like a little bird with only one wing. When Yarvi turned, Shidiksharen was looking down at him, adjusting the pins in her tangle of hair. "Fine singing, eh, Trig?" The overseer sniffed and wiped his eyes on the back of his hand, and in a voice choked with emotion said, "I never heard the like." The wise wait for their moment, Mother Gundren used to say, but never let it pass. So Yarvi bowed and spoke to Shidiksharen in her own language. He did not know it well, but a good minister can make anyone a fine greeting. "It is my honour," he said sweetly, while thinking about putting black tongue root in a wine to sing for one so famous. She narrowed her eyes at him. "Aren't you full of surprises?" And she tossed him her mostly empty bottle and walked away, humming so tunelessly he could only just tell it was the lay of Froki. If he had been served that wine at his father's table, he would have spat it in the slave's face, but now it seemed the best he ever tasted, full of sun and fruit and freedom. It was a wrench to share the splash he had, but the sight of Rolf's huge smile after he took his swallow was well worth the price. As they made ready to sleep, Yarvi found the other slaves were looking at him differently, or perhaps it was that they were looking at him at all. Even Samel gave him a thoughtful frown from her place outside the captain's cabin, as though he were some she could not quite make out. "Why are they watching me?" he murmured to Jowd. It is rare they get a good thing." He gave them one. Yarvi smiled as he pulled the stinking furs to his chin. He would not be cutting the guards down with an eating knife, but perhaps the gods had given him better weapons. Time might be slipping through his fingers. He lacked a full set after all, but he had to be patient as the winter. Once, after his father had hit him in a rage, Yarvi's mother had found him crying. "The fool strikes," she had said. "The wise man smiles and watches and learns, then strikes." And that's the end of the chapter. See you next time. Bye.